Hello and welcome back to Curiosity Not Judgment. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
So today we are curious about emotions and curious about our own emotions and how our emotional response to others impacts the way that we engage, interact, succeed, fail. And so we want to jump right into it. And I am reminded of a conversation I had just yesterday. I was at a baby shower and I asked somebody, "How are you?" And the response was, you really shouldn't ask somebody how you are, because unless you really care, maybe just something like good day or good afternoon would suffice. And it was, a little bit of a snippy statement, but I said, well, I do care, and I can tell by the look on your face that you don't want to engage in that conversation any further. And emotions are a huge part of who we are and how we respond and how we engage and interact with one another. And so let's jump into being curious about our emotional stability or lack thereof and what to do with it.
There's a lot of people, especially in my group of engineers, that will say that, I take a logical approach to everything. And it's like, did you just say that with passion? Did you just say that with emotion, right? Like almost like disdain, that if somebody was not using logic, then it's bad.
Right.
So you're basically using emotion to prove that emotion is important. And I think it is. I think we all realize that the way we're feeling has a big determination on outcome.
Mm-hmm.
It has a big determination on how we are doing and how we interact with others. And, the old saying of never be hungry, angry, lonely, tired. The angry part is an emotion.
Yeah.
Some people say that emotions are a choice. I would say that how long we dwell on an emotion is more of a choice.
Okay.
But I don't think either one is black and white.
Sure.
I think there's people who have some issues, either acute or chronic. In other words, either temporary due to a severe life event, or long term, that they would say my emotions aren't a choice.
Mm.
There are some that would blame the fact that they are Irish for jumping off, flying off the handle, or
Sure.
things like that. There's lots of contributing factors.
Yes.
I would say that in general, though, in my experience, we talk about this in language that says, "Oh, are you wallowing in X?" Or self-pity or something like that. And again, we can talk about how much of a choice it is and when it's a choice, but in general, I would say that just like pain, if something hurts, there's a purpose for pain, and it's to get away from that. Now you can evaluate whether you want to do that again or not, but at least it tells you, hey, something's going on here you should pay attention to. And emotions are like that too. When I lost my wife, and I saw somebody about it, she would always ask me, "So how are you feeling?" And I said, "Bad." And she'd say, "Well, no, that's not even a feeling. That's not, that's a judgment, right?" She would say, and it's like, okay, then I'm feeling judgmental. She goes, no, you can't do that. There's this feel wheel she kept referring to. And I finally said, "Show me this feel wheel." There are 138 emotions and feelings on this feel wheel. And I was like, I thought there was two, good and bad. No, okay, so at first I thought that was kind of a joke, almost like, well, why do I need 138 ways to describe how I feel? What I did understand, though, in the journey is that it is very important to be able to describe and be aware of how I'm feeling, because otherwise you can't deal with it. Or I couldn't deal with it. I should use I statements. And so it is a very important subject. And I think for me now, I have certain red flags that go up, or orange or yellow flags at least, when I'm feeling certain emotions. If I'm feeling anger, if I'm feeling rage, if I'm feeling hate, those are things I want to not necessarily dwell on, because
Sure.
they don't necessarily, or usually in my experience, lead to good outcomes.
Absolutely. You said something that just brought an image to mind. We were my family was recently at a beach, and every day a flag would be raised that would show the condition of the water. So maybe it was a yellow flag with a black box, or it was a red flag with a squiggle or whatever. And I remember commenting to my brother-in-law, I said, those flags are really helpful if you know what they mean.
Yes.
And you just said something about, emotional flags in your own life. And I think there are times that we observe the flag is raised, but maybe don't fully know what it means. Like something's happened, the flag's flapping in the wind, and we recognize there's an unsettled or whatever emotion is starting to stir up, but we really need to stop and evaluate what's behind that. What's the definition of the flag, so that we can address it head on. And I think that is a really important conversation to have, not just for us to understand our own emotional well-being, but then to equip us to be able to shift out of that state, because as you pointed out, there are certain emotions you do not want to camp out in too long, because it does not lead to good stuff.
It doesn't, and I really like the analogy. I've got the visualization in my head now about the flag, which is really an indication of the state of, in this case, the ocean, the waves right out in front of you. But you could say that's my emotional state, and to watch out. And sometimes it's just an awareness. Be aware there's a mild riptide out there.
Right.
Other times it's like, hey, dangerous waters. Don't go swimming right now, because you're risking life and limb. And I think that's exactly the right thing to do. We always used to say, as parents, don't punish your child when you're angry. And I think that's one of those red flags that says don't go swimming right now. Don't engage with your child. You may not have the outcome you desire with your child, because if they remember the rage and the anger, they may not remember what you were trying to teach them the consequence of.
Right.
I think that's an incredibly good visualization, because if we don't know what the flag means, we're less equipped to understand how to respond.
And even if you have a general sense of what the flag means, the question is, are you going to heed it? Because, back to the vacation example, maybe the flag means mild riptide, but you don't quite grasp the seriousness of what a riptide can do to you. And you're on vacation, so why not go out into the water? Because you're only here for a few days, right? And it just takes one wrong step or one step too far to get you into a position where you can be very, very quickly overcome by that rip current. And so, this is something I actually want to think on a little bit more in the future, because I think it's a great opportunity to just raise awareness for ourselves, and I think to know what flag is up in your own process before you engage in conversation with others. We talk about some of the basics that you don't do. You don't go shopping hungry. You don't parent angry. There's a couple of pretty common sense pairings, right, that you want to avoid. But the things that maybe we don't think about is you don't get on social media when you're already angry, or you don't, right? I mean, we don't think about these things, but how quickly can our response to somebody become really embroiled because our emotional state was already escalated before we even jumped online?
It's really interesting, and I really like the analogy. I think even goes farther, and that is, okay, if I'm gonna go into the waters, because maybe I don't have a choice, have a buddy, have a support group, have some people who care about you. Not necessarily the person who's as whipped up or angry as you are, right? Or somebody who's gonna just massage each other's hearts about how much we hate this situation or hate that other person. But how do you establish a support group? Somebody who's watching out for you. Can you set up accountability systems to, if you do need to go into the water, that you're going to stay safe, and that there's somebody else watching, or somebody else who knows everything about you but likes you anyway, and can help you and give you signals and other flags that warn you about treading into different waters.
Well, and I think this goes back to some of our conversations in episodes past about having that team of support people around you, because you can have somebody yelling from the shoreline, watch out, you're getting too deep. But if you do get too deep, maybe you need somebody who's trained to be able to swim out there and pull you to safety. And those may be two very different people. And as you are engaging in your life and whatever that arena is, I'm sure for everyone listening, a different picture comes to mind about that dangerous water that you may be approaching. You need to know who are the people that you need to have kind of earmarked to be your safety net in case you get to that place where you're trapped in a rip current.
And know your own capabilities.
Yeah.
Are you a strong swimmer in this analogy? Are you fragile on this point? If you've experienced a trauma at one point in your life, you've got to be more careful of those situations,
Yes.
because those might be a trigger that are beyond your ability to pull back from it. Whereas if it's something that you're dealing with a lot, or it's not that big of a deal, then it's fine. And if you're an Olympic swimmer, a little bit of a riptide flag doesn't mean a thing.
Right.
But you know what? That person might be smart enough and have such good experience to have a buddy anyway.
Sure.
And so it's a combination of those kinds of things. And I think that again, so it comes back to being curious about when you're feeling a certain way or you've had a certain reaction. Why did I respond in that way? How am I doing right now? As I'm walking into this situation, how am I doing? What should I watch out for? What are the riptides and the things that I should do? What are the things in the environment? If I notice I'm swimming one way and yet I'm going another, that might be an indication of something, and I need to stop and readdress.
So we started talking about this exposure to what's called the feelings wheel. And if you are interested in it, I suggest just do a web search for an image of the feelings wheel. So I've got it up in front of us. I'm not going to turn around my computer to show you because I think it'd be distorted. And for those of you listening rather than watching, it's not going to be helpful. But I want to take kind of one piece of this pie and go a little bit deeper. So we are in a season where a lot of people are angry about a whole lot of things. So anger is earmarked as one of the 6 main emotions, but stemming from anger are other, sub-emotions that include rage, exasperated, irritable, envy, and disgust. So when you try to go a little bit deeper for yourself, you see that initial flag is up and you want to understand a little bit more the conditions of the water, so to speak, in our example here. There's a big difference in my mind between envy and rage. Huge difference, right? Like I may experience anger about a certain situation, and if I step back and say, really, this stems from I want what that person has and I'm angry I don't have it, that is a very different posture than I'm just in this state of rage because of X.
However, the next level on the wheel is hate. And you might get to hate because you envy something that somebody else has more, or out of rage. And so I think that the wheel is instructful in that way, in that, yes, those two things are very different, and they're very different outcomes from anger. But they can lead to a very bad place. The hate is a big deal. We are in a situation nowadays where everybody seems to hate everybody else. You've heard me say the saying, we come in, we put our garage door up, we put it back down behind us, we go inside, sit down on the couch and see who we should hate tonight. And I think that that's a bad thing. I heard something just the other day. The worst thing you can do to yourself is to hate someone else. And I think it's toxic. I think it's something that wears on you and your own soul and your spirituality and every person. If you think about what was the whole Buddy Hackett thing, he used to say, you can hate somebody, but they're out dancing a jig, or the one that says, not forgiving somebody or hating somebody is like drinking poison yourself and hoping it affects the other person.
Yep.
It really hurts you more than the other person. And even if you're thinking some rationalization like, well, if I hate the person, I'll never become that person. I would say that you've become that person if you hate that person. Maybe worse. And so I'm not sure there's ever a good reason to do that. And if we're out there trying to stir up rage and anger and hate, I don't understand the worthwhile of that. I understand being passionate about something. I understand saying, hey, you're not listening to me, or I don't think we're being heard properly here. Fine. But understand that those same people are saying, well, I want to be heard too. And we're all just going on our own journey, trying to be heard and trying to be appreciated for our own personhood. And so I think that going to this, taking that anger, I remember somebody telling me a long time ago, it's okay to get angry. It's what you do with it. How long do you spend in it, and where are you going with it? And if it goes to rage and to hate, I don't see how that's a good thing.
So there is a third ring on this emotion wheel, this feelings wheel. And so I'm almost wondering if this is a helpful tool for us in general to print out, just to have as a visual reminder, because it's not that you can literally kind of click the dial and force a change, but if we can, as we've talked about again in prior episodes, kind of rework the tracks in our brain to get out of that rut of thinking. If you're finding anger leading to rage, leading to hate, can we get out of that rut a few clicks and move over even into annoyed? Because again, I would argue there's a big difference between hate and annoyed. Because I can be annoyed with you, but that is far removed from me hating you.
No, and I suspect you are frequently annoyed with me, and hopefully it doesn't lead to hate. But again, and I think that's why you hear reasonable people say things like, boy, that's disappointing. Not, I hate this. Right? And language is important.
It is.
And like the old guy I was listening to who was a former SEAL, he would say that, anger is contagious. Fear is contagious.
Absolutely.
And he would say, followed by stupid is contagious. Right? And if we want to be peacemakers in the world, and I'm not saying everybody wants to be that, but I would suspect, if you think of the opposite of stress is not unstress, it's peace, right? The opposite of anger on this wheel is joy. If we want to have the opposite effect of the things we see going around us, how do we do that? And I think that dialing things down and helping people see each other as people is a good thing, and language is a part of that.
It is. It absolutely is. And I want to transition just a little bit, because I'm curious about your response on this. And this may be a male-female difference. It may be a whole lot of things. But I am accustomed to asking people how they are and not really being content with a courtesy answer that I hear all the time. I am one to really look at the facial expression, and I am one to want to know the answer, but not everybody's ready to share. And so I guess navigating that ground we've got these basic emotions, and you can respond with, how are you? Fine, or I'm glad, or I'm hungry, or I'm tired, but there's always the sub emotions behind it. And how deep do we want to go? How much time do we have for the conversations? In what settings are these conversations appropriate? How dismissive are we of one another's feelings when we ask a question?
So, some people carry their own weather around with them. And I don't, knowing you, I wouldn't be deterred by one person's response of, you shouldn't ask me that. You know what? I understand this is your response, and I get your message. You're not wanting to talk right now. And I think it's okay to say that back. Look, I can see that question, offended you, hurt your feelings, whatever. And I apologize for asking it, but I really do care. I think that's fine. Now, if people aren't ready to talk, or they're not wanting to do something, that's fine. It reminds me of the old saying of, we judge ourselves by our motives, but we judge others by their actions. Your motive in asking that question is different than most people's motive in asking that question. I believe, in my experience with Birga. And so I know exactly what you mean. And I may say to you some days, you know what, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
or I'm not good, but I don't like to admit that, so I'll just say fine, right? Or something like that. But you'll know because you're a good empath, right? I mean, you'll be able to read that. And then whether or not you go on is fine. I like to do follow-on questions. You've heard me many times. I'll say, so how you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. Really? How do you know? What's your metric, right? It's a typical engineer thing to say, but I like to go further than just the initial response, and not with the motivation of I want to be funny or cute or anything like that. I really do care. Now, some people again don't want to talk about it. Other people come up with some profound answers, which I really appreciate, and it's more than just kind of, I don't know. I'm becoming very, very aware that a lot of people just kind of bump along the surface all day long, and they don't ever dive deep into anything. And you know what? That's sometimes a response to I've just got so much going on in my life, I can't be overwhelmed by yet another deep conversation. Or it could be that I'm just tired, or it could be that I'm just stressed, or it could be a number of things. More power to you. I'm not going to criticize you for that. But I think it's always good if we have intentionally during the day a couple of real conversations. Real as a judgment. A couple of conversations that go beyond just the surface.
Absolutely. But discerning when the right time to have those deeper conversations, I think, is critical. And so, we can be curious again about what's lurking beneath the surface that we want to engage in, but not passing judgment if the ultimate answer in that moment is this is not the time.
This is not the time. This is not the place. This is not the situation. Last week I had a work colleague who I very much respect, and she had just lost a father, and it was not the time or place in the middle of a conference to have that conversation.
Sure.
But we've arranged another time in the future to meet for lunch or coffee, and I think that is the follow-on shows both parties that there's a relationship there that goes beyond the moment. And I think that's really what it's all about. To me, those relationships that are more than just surface relationships are what life's made of.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is a good point to kind of just bring it back around. And if that feelings wheel is a helpful tool for any of you, I certainly suggest using it, reflecting on it, thinking through, does that match your understanding of your own feelings? Does it help you get a little bit deeper into the water, so to speak, about understanding what are some of the draws, what are some of the dangers? And then, back to the analogy about the flags depicting the condition of the water below the surface or past the shore. Are you aware of the flags in your own life, and are you willing to be aware of the flags in other people's lives, especially those with whom you most often interact? And if you begin to see a pattern of these flags going up, can you then adapt your conversation and your interaction in those times to honor where that person's at in the moment?
And I would submit that the more you are aware of your own flags and other people's flags, the more effective the conversation is going to be, and the more effective outcomes you can have, and the more influence you can have.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good closing statement. So as always, we welcome you to just submit your thoughts, your comments, your feedback. You can do that through the contact link on the website, curiositynotjudgment.com. And we'll see y'all next time.
Take good care.